Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to Stanford. Thank you for being such an ardent and passionate supporter of the US-India relationship. It's great to have you here. Wanted to start by asking you something, since you spoke about the yatra, about this disconnect between politics and people. I imagine you're not planning on walking every year or every few months across India to gather information.
No, it's not a bad thing.
Perhaps.
I mean, every year is difficult. Probably not possible. But I think a little bit of movement's not a bad thing.
Fair enough. That's a good point. But somehow, in a democracy, we expect this to be institutionalized in some way, right? Same as in the US. As you said, we have a disconnect, it sometimes feels like, between what our people want and what our politicians say or what our politics are about.
I think the disconnect has a lot to do with concentration of wealth and sort of the inequality in society, and also the political system not being able to catch up with the social media and the technology. So there's a little bit of lag between the political system and the technological progress. And I think democracies are struggling with that.
Even though this is a point in time where technology is supposed to be connecting us like never before, what you're saying is that these institutions, sometimes it lags a little bit behind.
Yeah. I mean, the systems are not systems are not designed for this level of connectivity. And so I think a little bit of evolution in the systems is going to take some time, but it'll happen.
And what about social media generally? We're in the land of big tech right now. What role can technology play in trying to understand, perhaps bridge that divide, or do you think it's just fundamentally on these institutions, the government structures?
I mean, it creates an asymmetry in information. So, for example, in our case, the government has information that the opposition just doesn't have. Right? And that can be used politically. So that's one aspect of it. The second is it clusters people together and sort of creates silos where these silos have their own sort of belief structure and they're separated from other people. So it paradoxically reduces the conversation. You would think that more connectivity would simply increase the conversation. It's not necessarily the case.
And so then it becomes important for politicians such as yourself to beat the dirt and walk on the...
Yeah, and it's surprising, it was very surprising to me how effective and powerful it is. Because when you do that, the social media system, the press system actually doesn't have a choice anymore. Because their attention gets captured. So even if they want to move the attention, a act like walking across the country just fixates the attention. I think I understood the sort of Gandhi's Salt March much better, because I suspect at that time also, with radio and with these technological changes, they were facing similar problems. And I think that idea of walking across the country forces people to say, okay, so what's going on there? And then the thing starts to work.
Makes sense. Just turning to the purpose of your visit, US-India relations, what would you say is the current status of how our two countries work together?
I think there's a lot of good work that has been done from the 90s. But as I was saying, I don't see the acts of imagination. I think it's more of the same. But I don't see sort of the crystallization of a vision. I don't see an alternative to, for example, the Belt and Road. Right? Belt and Road is promising prosperity. It's a vision of the world. Right? It's a non-democratic vision of the world. Well, what's the counter vision? Right? So that's where I see that's where I see the gap. Of course, there is military cooperation, that's fine. That's important. But it can't just be military cooperation.
Yeah. So when you think about how that democratic vision should be formulated, in years past, the US has gotten sort of in trouble from other countries by saying, we're going to define democracy, we're going to carry it out, we're going to lead the way. And in some ways, the US has stepped back on that.
India is too big for, sorry, but how to define. That's not possible.
It's not just India, but for a world vision of what democracy is, what the counter to a Belt and Road.
No, everybody has a role to play. And you propose, right? You propose, look, this is how we think about it. And then others say, well, actually, we don't agree with that, we agree with that. Right? So I don't see that. I don't see that on the table. How do you compete with the production engine of the Chinese? Right? What does that look like? What does a democratic production system look like? Right? Because if you look at what has happened in the West and in India, we seem to have given up on manufacturing. Right? That's just something that the West certainly doesn't do. Now, of course, there's a conversation here in the United States about redoing it. But how do you do that in a democratic structure? What does that look like? Those are types of things that I think need to be discussed. Because I see it quite clearly that there are two models on the table. Right? There is a authoritarian model, and then there's a democratic model. Right? And the authoritarian model has got a handle on production. Right? So production in a democratic environment has to be conceptualized and actioned. And I think India has a central role in that.
What would that look like? I'm clearly not as familiar with India as you are, but when I work with young adults, I hear from them the same thing. I want a government job. They're not saying I want to work in a factory, right? Their aspirations are in some sense misaligned to manufacturing.
So that's the mindset change that has to be brought about, right? India has large number of skill clusters. In every district, there's a skill cluster, right? But we're not connecting that cluster with finance. We're not connecting that cluster with technology. We're not nurturing the ability to manufacture. By manufacturing, I don't necessarily mean massive factories the way China does. You could have small and medium factories. You could have technology-intensive factories. But at least get on with the business of production. It will probably look very different in India than it looks in China. It will probably be much more decentralized. So those things will emerge once you start discussing a potential vision. I also think that neither the United States nor India can do it alone. I think there's a synergy between our two countries that is required for it to happen.
What would that take on? What could the US offer to India or vice versa that you'd like to see?
I mean, India, of course, as I said, has it's what Saudi Arabia is to oil, India is to data. We have with China, we have the single biggest data pool on the planet. So that's a huge asset that we bring to the table. We have these youngsters who are here, and millions of them back home who understand how to manipulate that data, who understand how to conceptualize production. So we have that. We also have a population that is more than ready to work very hard. So that's what we have.
So when I listen to
You have technology. You have Silicon Valley. So these two things need to be brought together, but it needs to be a vision, right? And it needs to be you need to start actioning it.
So when I hear people from the opposition party coming out here, they talk about the same sorts of things. India needs to make more in India. Manufacturing needs to take off. The US and India need to work together towards this vision. How would you say you differentiate yourself from the ruling power in this dimension?
I have a completely different concept of India. I don't see India the way they do. They see India as a top-down, centralized system. I see India as multiple cultures, multiple religions, multiple languages. I see it as a decentralized system. I don't think one state should impose itself on another state. I don't think one language should be imposed on the people of India. So these
comes from Arman Sharma, bioengineering class of 2024. Over the last few years, your international presence has skyrocketed. You've delivered message at universities and clubs across the US, UK, and more. Here I'm trying to make Stanford feel special, but unfortunately we were among the last to get you. When we see struggles between the ruling party and the opposition in other democracies, we hardly ever see the opposition seeking international support outside the foreign ministry. You've gone rogue in some respects.
No, I'm not seeking support from anybody. I'm very clear that our fight is our fight. But no, I'm not seeking support from anybody. But there is a group of young students from India here, and I want to have a relationship with them, and I want to talk to them. I think it's my right to do it. I don't understand why the Prime Minister doesn't come here and do it.
Prime Minister Modi, you're welcome at Stanford anytime. We've been fortunate to have
answer some hard questions.
Press conference.
I'll tell you something. It's important for political people to put themselves in situations like this, because it's very valuable. It makes us refine our thoughts. It makes us think about things. And the odd question that you can't answer. So what? We're all humans. We're not gods here. So I'm more than happy to have the occasional slip up, because I gain a lot. I understand what you're thinking. I understand what you're working on. So to me, it's developing a relationship with young people here.
Excellent. We've had a number of BJP politicians come through, and unfortunately for us, not Prime Minister Modi yet. Let me ask one other question, and this is from Reina Bhatia, Bioengineering and International Relations student, class of 2025. So your party has been in opposition for 9 years now, and not surprisingly, you've made a number of complaints about how the opposition is excluded from decision-making. Say Congress comes back to power, what protections and rights do you think you would extend to the opposition? How would you rebuild?
I think our record is very clear. You can see the record of the UPA government. We didn't do any of this stuff. We were not threatening the opposition. We were not putting cases in the opposition. It's just not something we do. So this is a new style of politics that has come into India, and we certainly don't believe in it.
So is it just a political thing, though, or would you institutionalize some protections?
There are institutionalized protections which have been torn apart. Right? So yes, it would be strengthening those protections. It would be strengthening the institutional framework. But what is going on back home is not normal. It's not something that has been done even by the BJP before.
And do you see parallels? This isn't just an India-specific story. When you read the papers, you hear about declines in democracy. Even in this country, many people talk about declines in democracy.
I think, as I said earlier, it's a combination of dramatic increase in connectivity and concentration power.
Well, thank you very much. This has been very illuminating. Please come back to Stanford many times. We really appreciate it.